Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Winter Games Day 3 now. I am the host for this interview, Andrew Frumpkin, and I am joined today by Miss Carrie Ray Hill. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I am a former teacher, middle school, high school, survived that. And I'm not really good at being a gamer. I've carried that shame to this call and this conversation because I've been playing a lot of indie kind of exploratory games, but to watch me try to do anything else is a bit of an embarrassment. So in the 10 years that I've become involved in gaming, I've bought some games, learned to play some games. I'm a very good sniper, but that's about it. So that's my secret shame that I'm bringing to this full disclosure. But civics, social studies education, that kind of deal. And then now I'm kind of a accidental game maker of sorts.
Oh, that's really good to hear. And don't worry, some people never really get great at video games. I'm one of those people with, I'm not going to say what genre, but I'm not great at it either. And you help with a company called iCivics. What exactly is that?
Yes. So if you think back to your middle school days, whatever traumas you can get through to remember those days, you probably had a textbook when you had to learn about history or social studies. It maybe got opened, it maybe didn't, it maybe got doodled in, but it didn't probably touch your soul or get you engaged or make you think. So that's a curriculum that may have stunk a little bit. So our job at iCivics is to create a new curriculum that engages you, gets you excited, puts you in the middle of the action. And yeah, social studies is an action, and moves you that way. So we've got about 160 lesson plans and web quests that teachers can use with kids to kind of teach them the things they need to know about civics. And then we've made over 20 video games to get at that as well. So iCivics in and of itself is a curriculum, a free curriculum provider for middle and high school teachers and kids to engage with. So that's like the very short one floor elevator pitch.
Oh, free sounds pretty nice to me. I might check it
It
out later
is.
then.
It is.
Can you give me an example of one of the video games you made
Absolutely.
and how
Yeah,
it works, maybe?
sure. So I'll just go big. The biggest, craziest game that we have, and one of our most popular, is actually about the amendments. I know, get excited. There was a lot of amendments, and there's rights that you apparently have as an American citizen and resident. So it was one of our first games, and basically it's like a Diner Dash style game where you're a lawyer and you run a law firm, and your lawyers deal with different amendments, and people come in with problems like, oh, I was complaining about the mayor and he shut my blog down. And then you learn that, well, that's a First Amendment freedom of expression situation, and you match them. That actually doesn't sound super fun now that it just came out of my mouth. However, in this game, you have to serve a heck of a lot of clients very quickly. You have to decide strategically which lawyers with which skills to hire based on who's coming in your door. You can pimp out your office, is not the appropriate way to say that, but basically as you do well and win cases, you get monies to spend to get like seating in your office that makes people stay longer and are more patient with you, or you get different skills added to your lawyer base. So what it seems like a very simple kind of almost matching game is way more than that. It's strategic, it's stressful in a good way, and it's just always been our top game. And the other big game that I will say, big wise, is Win the White House. And this, learning wise, teaches you about the electoral college system. It teaches you about campaigning during a political campaign, and fundraising and media. Those are all big buckets of things to cover, but you're basically running a 10-week, you got to go through the primaries and get selected as your party leader. And then you go through, quote, 10 weeks or 10 turns to decide how to execute on fundraising, polling. You have to flip states if you're not winning them, and figure out how to get to 270, basically. And that's I think our second most popular game as well, because there's just a lot of stuff underneath the water that's happening. That's really fun and interesting. And there's a lot of humor in it too.
I think I may have actually played the second game that you mentioned. It sounds very familiar to me.
Yeah.
And
it's a hoot.
I do want to know, what was your inspiration for this thing? Because
Yeah, all of our inspirations actually come from learning standards, like what the teachers have to teach in civics. And so anytime I create a game, with Filament Games, by the way, they're kind of our partner in all of this, and they do a lot of they do the hard, heavy lifting. I'm just a subject matter expert and content writer. and teacher. But basically we're just like, wow, teaching electoral college isn't really fun. It's not really like, it's hard to connect for the kids. It's hard to make sense for them. But if we made a game that made them earn those points and fight for those points and do a bunch of other little learning objectives, then maybe kids will walk away and go, oh, okay. So this is why people talk about California and Texas and Pennsylvania and Florida, not so much about Wyoming, right? It's the electoral count. So basically everything that we do starts with learning objectives that come from like standards or whatever teachers have to teach. We pick the low hanging fruit of stuff that is maybe really difficult to teach, like just talking or with like a textbook reading. And then usually that means that they're better to make a game with. And so that's always our origin story. And then we get to play with the narratives and, what role you're going to be and what agency you have and stuff like that.
All right. That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't have to think up the original parts. I just have to figure out the rest.
That's true. Now, the original parts, like the game design and making it, I do have to ask, do you guys make it? Do you guys ask a game studio to make it? What's the process with that? And also, do you guys mess with these games day to day? Because I know you guys, I don't know the size of the company, but bigger AAA game-based teams work on their games every day, trying to make them better, patch out bugs. Now, these games don't sound like the types of games with lots of bugs, but I do want to know what's the day to day? What kind of interaction do you guys have with the people that physically make the games, or do you guys make the games yourselves?
Yeah, so we work really closely. In fact, I moved from DC to Madison, Wisconsin, where I am now, to embed myself with Filament Games, who is our game studio partner. Because I love them so much. I also love cheese and beer so much. So I moved here. I doubled down. And so what happens is we have an idea for a game on the learning side, or we have a funder, because everything we do is grant funded and philanthropically funded. So it's not like we have a lot of money to spend. And so I'll sit and work with like Dan Norton, who's the head creative guy there. And we'll just throw ideas, start wireframing stuff and thinking about it. In fact, I did that last week with him. And then what we'll do is we'll create a pitch, get some game features, some mechanic stuff ironed out, come up with a really solid pitch, get it funded, which takes anywhere from months to years. And then we build it. Our building frame with them is anywhere from 6 to 9 months. That's all we have to make a game. And so long story short, we don't get to get it back in there very often. When the White House is an exception, we made it in 2012, updated it in 2016, 2016, and then we just re-released it for 2020 because we try to make the issues and stuff going on in the game relevant to today's politics as much as possible. So like we don't put real people in it, but we do put the issues. Okay. And so those are moments where, again, we have to get it refunded, break the game back open, do it all like it's a new game. So we work very closely with Filament. They do the coding, the art, the sound effects, the VO, all the doing parts. I kind of help produce, write the content, oversee the learning objective piece, and basically just am at every meeting they have to do that. So it's usually over from conception to completion within about a year if the funding happens quickly.
Okay.
And yeah, once it's launched, unless there's some big massive bug that didn't make it through QA, we don't really touch it again until we get money to do so. And that's hard.
Now, are these download games or are they just on a website somewhere?
So probably many of you know in the space that like Flash isn't sticking around very long anymore. And we had originally made all of our games in Flash. So this last year and a half has been investing in the games that we already have, taking them out of Flash, recreating them with more features in Unity. And so those games are available on both the App Store, Google Play, and on the website as a Unity game. And then the ones that are still in Flash are basically just having to be sunset until we can get money to update them again. So we're going from about 20, 21 games to about 12, unfortunately, but can't control the trajectory of technology.
Rest in peace, Flash player.
God bless you.
Such a fun system. I'll miss it so much.
You got us so far for so long, but yeah, 10 years in, it's no longer a thing for us. So,
all right. So another question I have now is, do you think game-based learning is going to be something huge, something that the future learning is based off of? Because yeah, it's a big topic. Games are sometimes not seen too well not seen in such a good light in terms of from an education sphere, from what I remember.
Yep. Yep.
But
So I've been with iCivics for 10 years. And again, I went straight from the classroom to writing content like lesson plans and then got into the game space. So I've been going to like Games for Change and Play, Make, Learn conferences and stuff that really kind of focus on games for good, serious gaming, and game-based learning. And early on, we all were kind of fretting about how to get over the hump of the perception that games are bad, right? Whatever drama was happening that was blamed on video games. I think game-based learning and kind of educational games have always kind of stayed a little bit safer in that, you know, the format's a little bit different. The intent is a little bit different. It's not just entertainment, that they're really made with learning objective goals. So it was kind of like wheedling our way in to schools and administrators' hearts and minds and teachers' hearts and minds to get them to see the value of it. And I will say over 10 years, I've had to sell less and less the idea of it. And people are more open to it. Now that's been a decade of work by a lot of people in the industry. I think they're more acceptable in STEM. There's more money in STEM. I think like is it $15 per student on STEM is spent or 5 cents on civics. I may be a little bit off on that, but it's a massive difference, right? Yeah. So in the humanities, it's, you know, we're still growing. In STEM, I mean, they've got amazing VR stuff. You can build robots. You can do all kinds of things in STEM, and it's not really even bat an eye at. Now, if I were to bring in like a major AAA game or something and try, you know, without putting a lot of curriculum around it, that would still probably have some pushback. But I also know teachers who have completely gamified their classroom, which is a much bigger idea, where you take daily activities and add points and challenges to them. Those people have actually used things like Minecraft EDU exists just for that purpose. There's all kinds of games that may have a history thread to them, a humanities thread to them, like Walden, for example. And you know, you can bring that into the classroom, and it's just a different way of getting at learning. So again, I think we're really moving in the right direction as far as the hearts and minds.
Yeah.
And kids are already there. Like they're just like, finally, guys, show up, come on. It's just getting all the adults happy.
On that topic of games, it's just a history thread or a civics thread. Have you ever actually had a person come in and be worried? Because there are some very history heavy with a little bit of messing around. I'm referencing Assassin's Creed, a very mature game that is based on past time periods where the company puts a lot of time into making the world, trying to make it historically factual. But it is also one of those games that people are scared of, violence heavy, but also very history heavy in terms of teaching the past. Have you ever had people compare you to that or ask you if you're trying to make something similar to that?
No, I think if you look at our game just visually, you know that we're not there. You know what I mean? Like we know our audience, and half of that audience is the parents and adults in the room. But I will say that like I've seen Sid Meier talk about civilization. Like there is this whole movement to kind of show that even those games, if you're dealing with a mature enough student, right, or a mature enough player, that there's lots of things that you can do with that. So what we've found, and what I don't know, in the last 5 years maybe, is that rather than just giving our games as a tool for teachers to use, we actually give them a toolbox, because the game is not the thing. We have found that, and just like with your affinity groups, right, around a game, you guys talk strategy, you talk tips, you talk, you know, what tool you need to buy within the game to be better at it, or, you know, hacks or whatever. Can you tell I'm an old lady now? I'm just like throwing out words I don't understand.
You're getting them. You're getting the right words.
Okay, thanks. That affinity group, which James Paul G, which is kind of like our fairy godfather of iCivics on the game side, by creating those moments in a classroom where we kind of get the kids thinking about what's in the game first, have them play it, have them debrief the game, talk about what was hard, what was easy. That's actually talking about civics, not just the game, right? So I believe that anytime there's a game that has some value, content-wise or experiential, that if you kind of pack in the right kind of questions, then you've got a learning game, basically. And so the teacher has to be confident about it, and the students have to feel that they're in a space where I'm playing this game, but with a purpose. And that's what takes something that isn't learning and turns it into a product that is learning, in my mind anyway. And there's a lot of teachers that are doing just that, right, with regular AAA games and just kind of pushing the envelope.
That's true. And speaking of pushing the envelope, there's the always question you have to ask when video games come into this kind of setting. Are there any misconceptions?
Oh,
Or
dude, totally.
what kind of
Yeah.
misconceptions have you run into in terms of games trying to push their way into the education field? And have you had any pushback?
I think the misconceptions I actually deal with more often is what can and can't be taught in a game. Because if the way to like completely tank a game is to kitchen sink it. In other words, try to do everything in a single game that's not meant to be played for more than 30 minutes. And so what's happened is, like, for example, when the White House, there's two parties playing against each other, right? So it's a two-player, you're not playing against someone else, but like you have an AI that you're playing against, Democrat or Republican. And so we get a lot of criticism for not having a third party in there, which I totally get. We do lots of other stuff with third parties elsewhere. In that game, the mechanics of it only allows for two. If we were to add three or four, it would kind of like, I need to make a whole brand new game. And it makes it very different. And so for us, it's like, this is what the game can cover, and this is what the game cannot cover. So you need to cover this elsewhere. That's really where the criticism comes and the concerns come, is that one game cannot teach all of civics or all of any particular concept. It can really get at kids experiencing agency in a certain topic or a certain moment. And that's what civics games can do, in my opinion. People getting upset about games in general. I've had teachers say that like their principal does a pop-in, right, just to oversee how their class is going, and they were doing iCivics, and so they totally freaked out thinking they were going to get in trouble. But I'd say 90% of them said that the principal would just sit there through the class and see the conversations that were happening among the children and with the teacher, and that kind of showing the learning that was happening. Like they were debating where to set the tax rate in the county government game that we have. They were debating on how that impacts their popularity and reelection ability and ability to spend money in the county. So like, that's not chit chat, right? That's learning in action. So I would say 90% of teachers said that even if principals came with a critical eye to what they were doing, just seeing the game in action as a teaching tool kind of calmed that down a little bit. So a lot of it's just like, you can be a critic of it until you see it. And then if you're just open to seeing it work, then I don't know if I'll completely win you over, but you'll at least understand it. It's a tool that could work for some kids that other things don't work for.
That's true. And I'm going to pick on a little bit of the topic you just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
You said you can't just throw the kitchen sink into the game. It can't be trying to do everything at once, teaching so much. I fully agree with that. I've never been able to pay attention to the kind of teaching games like that where they're forcing more learning than game.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you guys do in particular to keep kids interested in playing the game and learning while still not overloading them?
Yeah, I don't even know what the special sauce is exactly, because what happens is during play tests and stuff, or even we'll get emails from kids saying, you snuck learning in, and like they're all mad at me or something, right? Or, their takeaway from our executive command game where the president was like, oh, that's a really hard job. I was like, yeah, it is. And you know why now, so I think we don't push content in such a way that if it doesn't make sense as a mechanic, it's not in the game. So in other words, you're not reading 5 pages of text to go play a 3-minute experience. So if the learning objective, like the student will be able to explain how the electoral college works. If I don't have a mechanic directly tied to the learning objective, then that learning objective gets kicked out. So in other words, I don't have like a laundry list of things that the game will do. I try to keep it to 3, maybe 5 if they're super related to each other. And that's it. And so if a mechanic does not support a learning objective, either the mechanic gets kicked out or a learning objective gets kicked out. It just depends which one's not supported by the other one.
All right. Now
I played crap games too, and that's usually what happens. Is they're just like, okay, now that we have you, let's get you 15 more, multiple choice questions.
Yeah, 15 more.
You learned. Yeah.
Keep going. I want to make sure you learned. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've got one more question on my list that I want to clarify because I think it's a 2-parter. One, do you have any relation, either company or anything, to Justice Sandra Day O'Connor?
Yes, so she's our fairy godmother.
She's the fairy godmother.
Yes, we did not start out to be a gaming educational organization. She retired from the bench in 2007 and looked around and was like, wow, we don't know much about civics, do we? And this was really around whether judges should be elected or appointed. So that was her own interest level. But she looked around and she's like, civic education isn't happening. We've got states who don't require it. We have states that don't teach it well, all this stuff that's happening. So she really decided, well, I'm gonna get some fellows and some law student types and some clerks of mine, and we're gonna look at a solution. So it started out as like, okay, well, maybe we'll do an ebook, maybe we'll do something because digital's the place to be in 2007. Fast forward 2009, the organization was called Our Courts. It was really justice focused. And then she met, at that time, she met with James Paul G, because they were both in Arizona at the time. And he basically sold her on video games. Again, just imagine that sweet, sweet woman just sitting there and getting sold on video games. To me, to this day, like I wasn't there yet, but I wish I would have been. But she just was like, well, if that's what the kids will be into, okay. And so we made it. We showed the stuff to her and she loved it. The teachers loved it that saw it. So they wanted more than just judicial stuff. So we went from Our Courts to iCivics and covered all the civic stuff. And we've just kind of been growing crazy since then.
All right.
So yeah, she still checks in on us,
right.
sees how we're doing.
So then second part of that question, and we'll keep this off the record a little bit. We're wrapping up. Do you think you're just slowly turning her into a gamer? Are we doing it? We're getting gamers into this?
I think possibly. Justice Sotomayor is also on our board, and I personally went to her chambers at the Supreme Court to teach her how to play a video game. She had never played before, so that's like a life honor for me. So I think that kind of once you see it, you become a believer. And so, I don't know if she's sitting around playing Call of Duty right now, but I know she at least appreciates the value of a good video game, which is an important takeaway.
Well, I am very happy to hear that. And I want to once again thank you for coming in today.
It was a joy. Thank you.
All right. And thank you, everyone that's watching. We will be right back after a quick break with another interview with VGBC.